On this episode of Straight Outta Gabriola,
you want a pot story?
Yeah.
Major pot story?
Sure.
Major Gabriola? I don't know if you have a
oh yeah, there are some stories. That's longtime islander and one of the original hippies to this island, Sephora Grignon. And I'm your host, Ken Gurr, and this is part one of the story of Island Weed. Now, regardless of whether you consume cannabis regularly or not at all, it is clear that pot or weed or cannabis or the herb or maybe even all four is deeply woven into the cultural fabric of Gabriola. Like it or not, it is the stereotype of this island and all the Gulf Islands on Canada's west coast, really, not to mention a few hot spots on Vancouver Island and the Kootenay region in the interior of British Columbia as well. It's here on Gabriola and the other Gulf Islands where the hippies and American draft dodgers settled in and carved out a beautiful life close to the land, full of creativity and art and cannabis.
You know, the fantasy of returning to the land. So we were back here with the primary resource people, because that's mostly what was going on. A lot of retired people.
Mm-hmm.
So fishermen. But there was fishermen and farmers and loggers and, you know.
Yeah.
It was a primary resource, mostly redneck kind of place that you wouldn't imagine was going to become the island of the arts.
That's Paul Grignon, and as he just said, Gabriola is known and branded, if you could call it that, as the island of the arts. And it's really hard to imagine this island today without the profound contribution of hippie and cannabis culture to creativity, to the arts, to living a different kind of a life away from the pressures of life in the mainstream. What would this place have been nicknamed instead, I wonder? How about the Isle of Yoga Instructors? Or maybe Gabriola, turkeys, turkeys, and more turkeys. Oh, come on. In part one, we're going to start with the early days of cannabis on Gabriola, remembering that it was legal in Canada until 1923, then illegal for decades until it was now made legal again back in October 2018. Part 2 coming out later, we'll look at the grow-op days on the island in the 90s and the early 2000s and the international reputation of BC bud, with much of it coming from this coast and these islands in particular, and then to today with pot legal and what island growers and entrepreneurs are thinking about. But first, here's Paul and Sephora to set the record straight right now on a couple of things from the days most associated with pot and Gabriola and the hippie era.
We didn't do tie-dyes then. There wasn't a tie-dye artist. We weren't wearing tie-dye clothing. We were wearing Guatemalan.
Yeah, it's funny. The museum wanted to do the hippie exhibit, and one person there wanted to, make it centered around a Volkswagen van and a lot of tie-dye stuff, and not one of us owned a Volkswagen van.
Or wore tie-dye.
Or wore tie-dye.
We were all wearing...
And nobody wore headbands either.
Maybe Shiloh did. But the point is, we're all...
We're all decked out in Guatemalan lapels. Priceless pieces of embroidery. You can't get it anymore.
One of them's in the hippie exhibit, but...
All the women were wearing Guatemalan. I wasn't much into the fancy stuff, but I had a beautiful purple shirt that I really loved. My purple Guatemalan shirt. I wore it for years.
Yeah, Sephora gave the look that only a loving partner can know from decades together. Now, in doing research for the show, I had many impromptu conversations at the ferry and at the recycling depot and the store. And man, I wished I'd had a recorder for all of them, because I was told by more than a few people time and again, oh, you should ask Dave. See Dave. Dave will know. Well, there are a few Daves on the island that could be considered authorities.
Come on, open up the door, will you? I got the stuff with me. I think the cops saw me.
Who is it?
Oh, what the hell is it? Go, man, open up the door. It's Dave.
Who?
Dave, D-A-V-E. Will you open up the goddamn door? Yeah, Dave.
Dave?
Right, man, Dave. Now, will you open up the door?
Dave's not here.
For all you young adult listeners, Cheech and Chong equals Harold and Kumar. Oh, there you are. Hey, Dave. How are you, Dave?
Hey, good.
Ask Dave, he'll know.
No, I can't honestly say that I can, but I do have a story for you.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, hang on, let me...
Well, wait a minute.
Okay.
No, I don't.
Yeah. So, basically, this Dave wasn't there either. And this Dave, who kind of reminds me of the dude in The Big Lebowski, unfortunately didn't want to go on record. So, it might have been him, or it might not have been him, or maybe it was another Dave. But regardless of that, we have it on pretty clear authority that Gabriola's relationship with cannabis was decades before the hippie era. In the 1930s, a settler farmer we can only identify as Grandpa George was a bootlegger during the Prohibition era. He had a whiskey still on the island and along with his moonshine also grew and shipped 50-pound sacks of Gabriola's wacky tobacco, as he called it. Exports made their way from the island down to the U.S. San Juan Islands, and then onto the jazz clubs and speakeasies of Washington and points further south, where it was in demand among the, quote, colored musicians. This Gulf Island archipelago is really just perfect, of course, for the movement of illicit goods. A few years ago, I walked off the trail in the forest lands here along the northeast side of Gabriola, and on a cliff edge with the ocean directly below, facing the open strait of Georgia, I stumbled on the remains of a very old, weathered makeshift bench with the spikes all rusted still on the two trees, and an ancient player tobacco tin with just, the remnants of the logo right beside the bench, and a pulley nailed to a tree, the rope long since lost. You can imagine the fellow doing the trade years ago, sitting there on a moonless night, smoking cigarettes, trying to stay warm, and waiting for that signal from the boat just off the coast. Okay, so now let's jump ahead to the 60s and 70s. Here are longtime good friends Kevin McCollum and Alan Darling. Now these two gentlemen, with their deep laugh lines around their eyes and that relaxed, comfortable vibe of the good life on the island, have got a few stories to tell as well. It's just for starters, if you two could take us back to... Well, first of all, how long have you both been here?
I came here in 1953.
Okay.
I was 6 years old.
Okay.
So I've only been here 66 years.
Yeah.
And Kevin was just, I've been here since 77.
77.
Kevin was just telling me about, I don't know if that was the first time you planted pot seeds.
No, actually.
But
yeah.
that was way back.
Okay, right. 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Back when they had, you got pot and it was all seeds and Mexican dirtweed, really. Mm-hmm. I took a handful. On the property we were living on, my grandmother lived there, and she was born in the late 1800s. Okay, and I thought she knows her plants. She's, plants she knows.
Yeah.
I thought, well, there was an acreage in the back of our property. I wanted to plant some marijuana. And I thought, well, I got to talk to her because she'll know what they are. Mm-hmm. I took a handful of seeds. I had a great big handful of seeds. I said, Grandma, I'm going to plant these back in that acreage back here. And she goes, oh, yes. We used to make cooking oil out of these, and to her, they were a valuable plant.
Right.
And but it's got to do with she was around before the Americans and the Canadians and all the nutcases made everything illegal, long before.
This is like the late 60s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
50 years ago.
Yeah.
That, because I was 21, 22, so I'm 71, 72. It's 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many people were on the island then? Like when 70s?
It was pretty quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I got here, there was 800. That was in 77.
And there was a big population boom in about 72. The island doubled in population at that time, so it gives you an idea. It's pretty small. Well, there was no cops over here. It was a farm community.
And here's Paul and Sephora.
Myself and Sephora original husband,
Ex.
boyfriend at the time,
Yeah.
had spent the entire summer in the Rockies hiking all the trails, and she spent the summer in England. And when we joined up, we actually caught a freight train out of Jasper on a first really frosty night of September. And
It
had
was a free camp.
wild
Jasper
full
free
moon
camp.
ride through the Rockies on the train, and a whole bunch of adventures. And then we slept out in Stanley Park when we got to Vancouver. Then we got over to Vancouver Island, and we tried to get a place in Ladysmith, and that didn't work out. And so and it was a rainy week we spent in Ivy Green Park
End of
with
September.
the wasps. And it was really getting bad. We came back to Nanaimo. We're sitting up where the cenotaph is now. It still had a bench in a little park. And we were really depressed. And we were sitting there, and these hippies walked by. I think there was 3 of them, but one guy came over and talked to us. And he said, "Oh, you people look like you could use a joint." And he just gave us a nice fat doobie, and we smoked it, and we looked across at the cliffs of Gabriola, and went, "That looks interesting."
Oh, there's an island
And the
there.
ferry's just down there.
You know, it was...
And so we walked down at the ferry. I got on. I don't know how we got separated, but you ended up with the McCollums.
With Kevin McCollum picked us up, and he got taken to Coho.
Ended up, but almost everybody who lived on Coho at the time, minus the tree planters, was on that boat. I met Rick Cranston and Harry Rowe, and I just the only 2 I remember. But there was like a crowd of Coho people who'd gone to town together. And we were invited, and they said, "Oh, you can sleep in that house. They're away tree planting." So we crashed there with 2 other people who were also crashing there. And then the next day, we set up a tent from over here. I set up a pump tent right where this house is standing now. And we've been here ever since.
The gist is that it was an era where it's like the hippies looked after each other, right? They saw us. There's 3 of us sitting there. We're kind of tired, depressed, and it's like, "You guys look like you need a joint." And it was just generously,
Given,
no
and
money,
we smoked it.
no money.
So who knows? Had we not had a joint, we might have given up and gone to the employment office and got a job somewhere green chaining. And
Well, the thing is,
couldn't even get a job green chaining.
It
You don't have an address and a phone number. They won't hire you.
it was
If
just,
you don't have a job, they won't give you an address.
Well, it's just-
We'll rent you
Yeah,
a
you're
place.
caught. You're
So
stuck.
we'll rent a place.
it just kind of, it's always so fascinating when you think of all these people in your life that, like I call them hippie X, because
We don't know who that
We don't
was,
know who
but
that
it was
was,
pivotal.
but it was a huge pivotal event for us.
And it definitely was caused by marijuana, making the cliffs of Gabriola look so enticing.
I remember people smoking openly on the ferry deck.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
No problem. And
Actually,
any
yeah.
social events, pot was part of the culture. Not for all the islanders, because
Yeah.
the old farmer culture of the island that had been here when Kevin's parents came, there was friction.
Oh yeah, there was very much.
Between the old islanders and the
There was a
hippies.
very much, it was very. I felt very much in the middle because I like to hang out with all the hippies and smoke pot. Yet, well, not my parents. My parents' friends were all very stiff and were being invaded by this hippie horde. My parents were actually really good. I even smoked some hash once with my mom. This would have been about the same time, 71 or 72.
But there were naked people everywhere, and there were it was pot.
Oh, good.
Pot was part of the culture for the new residents.
Naked people everywhere. Okay, another foundational pillar to community bonds and cultural life was holding regular potlucks. And potlucks are still a very prominent part of community culture here on Gabriola today. On Coho Drive, where Paul and Sephora live, their property was at the center of it all back in the 1970s. They built their house section by section as the family grew and money and driftwood and other materials allowed. And we looked out over the porch onto the expansive garden space below and remembered. So the gatherings used to be here
Well, people would have potlucks, but this would be like the bigger ones.
Yeah, we have a photo of a really large circle of people up in that little area there. Yeah.
then going back to potlucks, I mean, we kind of had a bit of a... I mean, I guess some of the guys might have smoked throughout the day, but there seemed to be an etiquette at potlucks that first we'd have the main meal, and then we'd put out the desserts, and sort of around the same time as the desserts, the guys would be rolling or, passing...
A lot of pies with whole wheat crust.
But I mean, I actually use it as... I get cerebral, so I sort of didn't eat as many desserts, because I filled up on the yang foods, the healthier foods, the non-sugar, and then I... like to me, I have it like people have a glass of wine at the end of the day, or
Right.
After dinner, so it was like I was far too cerebral to eat a lot of dessert. I mean, I liked what it did because I'm not a drinker, so I would just have it after the kids, at night. Kids are in bed, or everything's settled. We've had dinner. And then I just sort of settle in and have some, and then we play some music.
Here's Paul Gellman, who first came here back in the 1970s.
When the cold wind blows, can we make it so? All our dreams seem so far away. Can we find our way back home someday? And we're all searching, and we'll all climb the mountain when we're ready, and we all will keep searching for something special, and we're all on this island. Oh my Lord, you seem so far away. When I feel so lost, can you light the way? All my dreams seem so hard to bear. When I call your name, will you be there? 'Cause we're all searching, and we'll all climb the mountain when we're ready, and we all will keep searching for something special. We're all on this island, yeah. We're all on this island, yeah. We're all
So with all the cannabis and the lifestyle here in the 1970s, was that the dawn of the famous BC bud? And people were primarily growing at that point for themselves, but was there an export market as well? I'm sure
Mostly just for yourself.
Yeah.
At least that was mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think.
Well, I mean, if you grew more than you had, you could find somebody to sell it.
Yeah, or sell it to. Yeah.
Yeah, pot was pretty cheap, but I remember there being more of an import market. I wasn't really aware of it. Big homegrown was a lesser thing, right? And people were importing pot from Mexico or Hawaii, or we were talking about you used to get a bag of Colombian marijuana.
Yeah,
and it was just this seedy brown weed. It really was weed. To top all the seeds and stems and roll to the bottom, you ended up with a half an ounce of pot.
Well, the basic story back then is you couldn't buy seeds, so you had to buy some pot that had seeds in it and save the seeds, and you didn't know what the hell it was, or generally Mexican something or whatever, Colombian. If they called it Colombian, it tasted better somehow, but you had to find some seeds in a bag.
Yeah.
You couldn't just go to the store and mail order them over the internet.
Yeah, so that's what you were doing.
Yeah, so we were doing it. We grew this low-grade stuff, and there was actually never enough. You know, people think, oh, there was so much pot. Actually, there was so much desire. So little supply. Except for a few people.
They first learned how to grow pot before gardens, before food. Because most of us had come from the city, and maybe some of us had some garden time with family, but I didn't. I lived in a suburb in the city, and my parents didn't grow food. So that's how we got started on agriculture, was through the growing of pot.
Alan, you were saying something about the fellow who developed his own little strain here. Do you remember the name of it? Did he call it?
Oh, no, I don't think it had a name.
Okay.
And it was good strain, though, I'll tell you.
Because there's like 1,000 now.
Back in the day, and we're looking at it and developing strains and thinking about the future we're living in now, maybe.
Yeah.
But I wasn't one of those, and I didn't know anybody who was doing that. Like, even the one we're talking about, where there was a Gabriola seed strain. It was a seed strain. Nobody was doing clones. Nobody was keeping clones alive all winter. So every summer was a new adventure. Right?
See what you get.
And you see what you get, and sometimes it worked. You know, it was loose and easy, and things happened, and people had crops, and sometimes it was better, and sometimes it was worse. But do we want a strain named after that?
Well, we taxate a time warp. I mean, there's got to be a Gabriola one we can come up with. It'd be nice.
Yeah.
Well, if we work really hard, we could probably find someone who thinks they still have seeds from that old crop.
Could have been the Willie Nelson, or it could have been the wine. I went down the rabbit hole on this one, and I popped up over at this guy's house.
One of the things I did was organize a nude-in. This is the days of sit-ins, right? We decided to have a nude-in to save the beach. And Georgia Strait gave us the back.
Now that's David Beam, a guy who has the looks and charisma of that classic kind of Hollywood Kirk Douglas blended with Owen Wilson. Raconteur, ecologist, retired silviculturalist and chimney sweep, bon vivant, avid bird watcher. What else? Well, I joined him for a strong cup of coffee. Listen in. You mentioned to me when we were at the spring fair that you were the first to bring, I think, was it indica? Is that what you say?
From when I came from, I went with the Greenpeace. They finally recruited me on the Greenpeace 3 campaign, where they were opposing the French nuclear testing in the South Pacific. June 1972, the King of Sweden invited the world to come to Stockholm to a UN conference on the environment. It was called Man and His Environment, and Rod Manning and I hitchhiked across Canada. Our Senate and the parliamentary had a committee to get public input, and they started in Vancouver at the Hotel Vancouver, and they went in each province all the way across and to the territories as well. And then preparatory to get the Canadian public input into the position we should be taking it. And so we hit them with Greenpeace stuff all the way across the country, ripped apart their green paper and all the rest of it. And by the time we got to the Maritimes, I was selling pot to the guys that were doing the instant translation and setting up the mics and working for this committee. and off we flew, and Rod and I, we went from Gander, Newfoundland, and Greenpeace bought me a ticket, $200 return.
Okay, so we pick up the story again when David returns to Newfoundland after his European adventures and a mind-blowing music fest he told me about called Stockholm Stock, of course, in Sweden.
In Gander, Newfoundland, and they found my little pipe, and they in my pocket, along with all the road maps and things that I collected over the course of 2 months or 3 months, and some seeds. And they arrested me and took the pipe and sent it off for analysis to the only lab, which was in Nova Scotia. So I spent 2 weeks in jail, and the library was up above, so I was able to get War and Peace. And Napoleon was just leaving Moscow, retreating from Moscow as the third book. Have a seat right there.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And I had to hitchhike down to St. John's when they finally released me, and gave me a $75 fine and 3 weeks to pay. So I basically was given 3 weeks to see Newfoundland and never come back. And because we don't have extradition treaties between provinces.
Yeah, that's right.
So I discovered in the pockets of my army coat that there was about 7 or 8 seeds that they had not found, that Hendrik de Wilde had given me.
Yeah.
Remember Hendrik?
I know
Hendrik,
yes.
Well, he's here because we met in Stockholm. Oh. And he told me that, Pink Floyd is the best band ever, and I'd never heard of them much, They're a British band, right? So, and he had interviewed them for the underground newspaper that he worked for in Amsterdam. And he said, oh yeah, if you ever get a chance, go and see them. So, a couple of months later, I happened to be in Port Alberni tree planting, and after having finished my trip, and Pink Floyd were playing at the Vancouver PNE. Went over on the weekend to go and see Pink Floyd. Fabulous show. They had 2 naked showgirls with, and this is 72. I mean, there was not nude dancing in the bars in those days. Yeah. And they were in high heels and a headdress, and that was it. Dancing on top of these wall speakers that were. And in the final show, and they had smoke everywhere. They lit the drums on fire. It was a huge fucking show. And everybody was smoking in there. And at the end, the lights went up, and everybody kind of dutifully got up and lined up and started filing out through the exits, right? And there's 2, and I just sat there and waited, and waited. There's no way I'm going to stand in line for anything. And there's a guy on the other side over there that's doing exactly the same thing. And we'd gone up, and everybody had found out, and we sort of walked across the floor. It was Hendrik, and he'd just come from Stockholm. And said, Hendrik, you got to see my house. I got a tree that's so big in my backyard. You've never seen anything like it in your life. He settled in Nanaimo, and I met him again in Nanaimo. I said, come on over to Gabriola. And I came over here.
Wow. And that was what year, would you say?
72.
72.
Yeah, that would be in the fall of 72.
And the forgotten seeds in your pocket.
Forgotten seeds in my pocket. And I grew them. I sprouted them and planted them. And they produced at LG Road Farm where I was living. They produced these short plants that turned brown and kind of purple. And they only grew waist high, and they had these great big huge fucking buds on them. Holy shit, I couldn't believe it. And I let them go and go and go on into October, and they were below the level of the grass. So, it was totally cool. I had people walk right in through them and didn't even see them. They were just didn't look like what you'd expect. They were filled with seeds. So I collected all the seeds, and I tried to sell them, but nobody on Gabriola wanted them particularly. I did manage to give a handful away. Nobody would pay me any money for them. Except these guys from Lasqueti. And they came down and they bought 2 ounces of seed, and they paid like $100 or $50 for an ounce of seed. And I was thrilled to give it to them. Well, that became the Lasqueti Purple Skunk. Is what that became. So it was a cross indica. Because it was fertilized with local cannabis, I suppose. Just what was in the air.
Which is the elusive question that I've asked a few people I've been chasing is, do you think there was ever a Gabriola strain that you could call, this was something
yes, but we would never want to call it Gabriola. We're thrilled to call it Lasqueti homegrown or whatever, because we didn't want the heat. It's illegal. So, call it from Galliano or Gabriano, the generic Gulf Island, but not even Gulf Island.
Back in the 60s and 70s, this wasn't the big black market business that weed was to become. So what about earning some kind of cash? Here's Alan and David.
I don't remember very many people working. Everybody was a carpenter and building their own house, and everybody tree planted. It was that, not everybody,
but a big part of the...
That was how the community lived, you know.
Well, I first came here, I had a contract to plant 69,000 trees on Valdez Island. And I used a crew from Coon Bay, 8 or 9 people from Coon Bay, and the food order from the co-op when it arrived. Up we came in small boats, and we got the local fishermen to pull all of our dinghies and canoes and whatnot and kayaks, and we squatted in a place on the east side of Valdez and walked to work every day through this lovely old growth coastal forest, loaded up our trees and planted pine trees in there. And it's just on the south edge of the new park there, the Wake Cove Provincial Park. And there's a fence, and there's all these twisted, gnarly pine trees that didn't grow. They got to about 30 feet, and they got all canker and whatnot. But at the end of the 59,000, they said to me, we've got 10,000 we'd like you to put up here in this area that you didn't get to. You ran out of trees. We planted them too close together. And so I said, okay, well, we got a better price per tree. And they said, sure, we'll meet, we'll bring them in on 2 days or so. And my Galliano planters, you had to push them every step of the way. They were so fucking lazy and slow and useless, and asked me the same fucking questions over and over. Like, when am I getting paid? When are we going to quit? What's for dinner? Just absolutely. But when am I going to get paid? This is the prime question. And I said, fuck off. Finish the job. I hitchhiked over to Gabriola the first time from Valdez. The first time I set foot on Gabriola was Degnan Bay, and I went out and stuck out my thumb in the pass. The first boat that came along picked me up, took me over to the dock, and I needed to find a fish boat or somebody to take the Galliano crew home, and I needed to find a new crew of planters to do this extra 10,000 trees. So I went up to a hippie encampment that was at the Maples. There was a school bus there, and there was washing lines with diapers and dresses and things on the. And I knew there were hippies in there, and I went and I knocked on the door and I asked if they could find me. And they sent me back in a pickup with a guy. Took me to Coho Drive, and by the time I got up to Paul Grignon's place, I had an entire crew. And I said, okay, well, meet me at the dock at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. And then the guy in the pickup took me over to the fishmonger who had the fish shop up here. Three boys, Jay LaBelle.
Yeah, the LaBelles, that's right.
Fuel costs and $50. he met the Gabriola planters the next morning. He was there at 9 o'clock, and they all showed up on the dock, and with their equipment and everything, and took them over, dropped them off on Valdez, and then I stayed on the boat. We went around the outside and down to where the Galliano planters were still sleeping in, and he just roved it right up onto the sandstone. I couldn't believe it, holy shit. And everybody started handing down all their pack sacks and piling canoes and whatnot, and took us all the way down to Galliano. Well, I jumped off the boat when they got on, and I waved goodbye, and off they went, and Jay came back on his own later, and I walked up to the site, and by the time I got there, the planters had all bagged up, and they were all gone. All the trees were gone. They'd fought over the 10,000 trees to get as many as they could. And they went in and they planted. Well, you go there now, all the pine trees were stunted and useless. It was an experiment.
Yes.
And the 10,000 fir are the most magnificent forest of Douglas fir that you've ever seen anywhere. They're well spaced, tall, straight, no lower branches. They're just, it's absolutely wonderful. And the woad winds through them.
Yeah.
It's the nicest pure stand of Douglas fir on the Gulf Islands, or one of the nicest.
Wow,
It's really, really good.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And that's the Coho gang.
The Coho gang, and they didn't complain. They loved their work, and I showed up there, and I had about a 30-pound crock, a stainless steel crock with a lid, and 10 pounds of beans, of kidney beans, and they had no food hardly, and so we immediately put on the pot of beans, and we had a great big huge rice and beans dinner that night, and everybody got fed, and everyone that was there, I offered them work, because I had a 500,000 tree contract in not Port Alice, but Gold River, north of Gold River.
Yes.
So that's where the mother of my first boy was one of the cooks on that, and she and her friend were the two cooks, and I had 35 people up there, 5 kids, 15 men, 15 women, and 2 months of work planting trees. And the CBC did a show of that. It's called Between Ourselves. It was on Friday night on CBC, cross country, and I even have a copy of it.
Okay, do you remember the lead-in at the start of the episode?
You want a pot story?
Yeah.
Major pot story?
Sure.
Major Gabriola? I don't know if you have what. The wedding.
Here we go.
You really want to know the whole story?
It's a good story. It's a major story.
Well, we won't name any names, but a certain resident of Coho, now deceased.
Okay, well, we're going to start out with the wedding itself, where we have Mark and Dana, who she's from a home, her father's like Mr. Landowner, Gabriola, farmer, whatever, and he's this hippie that we think's come from another planet, really. And he came from California, but he's like, ugh. And they
talking
got
to
married.
Mark is like talking to an alien.
They decided to get married. It's like, really? So anyway,
we didn't even know they knew each other, and all of a sudden he announces the wedding. Her family's side all got invitations, and we just go, hey, you want to come to the wedding? And Mark said, oh, if you want to come, show up. So as we show up, everybody's looking at pure freeloaders. Oh, the groom is bringing nothing but an unlimited number of freeloaders.
Yeah, you were invited.
We didn't even...
imagine this, the old community hall this was in.
You've
They
seen
didn't
pictures
take
of it.
the plastic off the windows since
It was in
the winter time.
August, early August.
Okay, so we've got the equivalent of double insulated windows on there, and you can't see out them because it's plastic. And it's so hot and stuffy, and everybody's sitting around, and around come brownies and some cookies. And the cookies were mashed cookies, and the brownies were unbelievably overdosed, made with pure flower tops by a successful pot grower from the street. And nobody was told. The minister ate some. People who'd never done pot before ate some. One of the things about this legalization thing and buying stuff in the stores, I think people might actually think that eating it is less harmful than smoking it. quite the opposite. It's the only way you can
I don't know
have a
if
bad
you've
trip.
had
It's
any-
eating it.
Yes.
And man, did we have bad trips. Everybody was so seriously overdosed. I mean, at certain points during the afternoon, I was unable to stand up. It's like, when you're drunk and you can't get up, except you're not giddy like drunk.
No.
You simply have
it's
no...
like vertigo.
Actually, it was no will. I ended up having a debate about life and death with the guy who made the brownies, and we walked down to the Maples there and sat by the beach. Sat by the beach and discussed the whole thing. And he says, well, what's our next desire? He says, I want a beady. So we walked back up to smoke a beady. Like literally, we were on the feeling of being overdosed on pot is that everything is already dead, so what's the point? So when people get on about how pot demotivates some people, that is the effect it has on some people.
However,
on other people, such as myself, I just call it patience medicine because I'm always jumping ahead. Pot for me allows me to slow down and concentrate.
Mm-hmm.
Eating, however, it's like you don't know how much you're getting, how strong it is. Oh, I'm just eating, and they didn't really tell. Some people got like the minister got stoned. He didn't.
They had to take him away. The band was playing.
Well, I want to tell.
Oh, you want to tell that story?
All right,
Okay.
Sephora.
I'm gonna get myself some coffee now.
Okay.
We had our own hippie musicians, including Paul Gellman, who was here at the time, I think. And he left and came back years later. But I have to say that before, it was 1976. It was a definite us and them feeling going on. And
we were just as guilty as them.
Oh, yeah. There was definitely that. And it wasn't with everybody. Eric Bolton, bless him, understood us on some level. And he still is, he respects us, and we're here. We've done what we've done.
If you want to go beyond the topic, the mushrooms, I have a great mushroom story.
But we're on the wedding right now. We're on the wedding right now.
Okay,
on the wedding. So we have this band, and they're inside in this hot place with the plastic on the windows, and they've got this song, and it goes, and there ain't no illusion, we gotta do away with this mass confusion. We gotta get down to what is real.
Like we're all stoned out of our gourds, we can't stand up. The other people are drunk
real.
and getting angry.
And this is all real. And we're all in our own druggy world, whether it's the drink or the pot, or the brownie.
And there was total enmity of, it's like the Palestinians and the Jews getting together for a wedding.
Not quite that. But it was definitely intense. And it was not a good vibe. Put it simply.
The miraculous thing is that the next day, a number of us felt called to go to a place we never went to.
Are you sure somebody didn't say? Somebody must have said. Because it doesn't make any sense to me why we would all go to this park.
I remember that a few... Yes.
What happened?
Somebody suggested it to us and we went with them. I can't remember who it was.
Doesn't matter.
But when we got there were people there who had shown up by coincidence because we verified that they didn't know us and they didn't, and it was the credit union campground, but we had to access it from McConvey by this circuitous trail. We tried to repeat it last summer and it doesn't seem to be workable anymore, but it got you into the lower meadow of the campground. And a bunch of us met up for this healing circle the next day. I said, how did we all go there? I mean, nobody even knew about that.
But the main thing is that everybody felt the same way about those brownies and the whole event. Like they said, it was a deadening feeling. But then again, I think we were looking at the bigger picture, the us and themness of it all. We thought we were doing such important evolutionary work, being hippies and moving us forward.
I still think the hippies were right. Had we gone the direction we wanted now, we wouldn't be facing ecocide at the end of the life on Earth.
Well, that's true. I mean, there's a great song.
An ocean full of plastic and all the other crap.
There's a great song by some Kootenai guys, the hippies had it right.
We lived in
Look it
a
up, you might be
commune
able
in
to-
Oregon for 7 months, and in 7 months we produced 1 garbage bag full of garbage.
Wow. Yeah.
But that wedding, I think it was a big turning point for us in our awareness of what was going on. And I think many of us learned not to eat it, or at least to just take a little bit at first to see how strong it was. And, because it's not really fair. It's like, here, have something, and you really have no idea how strong it is. Like, I'm just finding out that bourbon is twice as strong as whiskey.
Twice distilled, isn't it?
Twice distilled, it's like, I don't, so...
I don't drink, so I know
But
experience.
it was definitely a learning.
So some lessons learned there. And what it all comes down to? Thoughts, Sephora and Paul. Some final thoughts from Ellen and Kevin.
You are, in the sense of, like, if that's sort of, it's his medicine. It's his natural.
Well, it always has been.
Yeah.
Now it's for physical pain. It's always been for making life less painful.
Marijuana is a wonderful friend. It's an enlightening agent.
Yeah.
I think
It's like a fine wine, a good scotch. It just puts a nice mood on your
And
life.
even more so in my life, I'd say it's been illuminating, and it's helped me find a better path than I might have walked without it. And so I really see it as in the Carlos Castaneda sort of way of being an ally and a friend, But that being said,
What's that?
kind of lost my train of thought.
Well, that's
It was a
Perfect
beautiful
example.
It was a
of
beautiful.
exactly what I was going to say.
It was a beautiful train. I think that just faded beautifully off into the
Went off
That's
into the
right.
sunset.
into the sunset. I like it.
And it'll come back again soon. It's on a circular track.
Yeah, I like it. Thanks for listening, and to these beautiful people who shared their stories. And if you want to know when part 2 is out and other upcoming episodes of this podcast series, please subscribe on your podcast app or sign up for email alerts or connect with us on Facebook. Bye for now.